Welcome back to Kings of the North. Did you miss us? Do you think they missed us, Bill Landis? Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis back for a third straight day because college football is popping. Bill, we have a lot to talk about. We're going to start with the playoff, though. We're going to do a thing where we are going to pick the most dangerous player we think in each region. Like a guy, like I don't think of this as like an X factor. This is like a guy who really is maybe like a primary guy who really has a chance to like swing the bracket, right? Is that how you thought of it?
That is how I thought of it, but I also like there are a couple of very obvious ones, and I tried to avoid those. Like we can talk about them, but those weren't our picks. But yeah, not like an X Factor is suddenly going to come out of nowhere, but a guy who might be poised to maybe take it up a few notches.
Yeah. So we'll do that. Cram-o-Meter. You got some cram in you? You think you got some cram?
Were people doing things that were cram-worthy on Sunday? I wasn't paying attention.
I said I didn't get I was going to run to Walmart and Target and see where they were on cram meters. I don't know what the holiday season, if there's already been a rush on cram-o-meters, but we got some cramming to do. We'll talk about the portal. We'll try to keep up with the portal.
Yeah,
like there 47 more guys might go in the portal during this show. But can you tell people
when you finish that sentence?
Yeah. But I'm going to start this sentence and see how many are in the portal by the time the end of the sentence. Tell the people the idea you came up with, though, that I think is going to be our Thursday show, right?
Is that the QB thing? Yeah. We're going to go basically team by team in the North, all 28 teams, and discuss whether or not we think they should be portal shopping for a quarterback.
So we'll lean into like the most important portal stuff here at some point during this week. Barry Odom, new Purdue coach. We're going to do some other coaching stuff. Jeff Grimes going from Kansas to Wisconsin as the offensive coordinator. Certainly check in on that. And then we want to run through all of our bowl teams. So by my count, and I believe this is correct, of our 28 teams, and I'm going to order a Boise State flag today. By our 28 teams, 5 are in the playoff. 15 are in other bowls, some against each other, and then 8 are not in bowls. So we'll run through some of the interesting bowl matchups, and we're not going to forget about all the other teams because we're going to be focused on the playoff, but not only focus on the playoff because PJ Fleck might get mayo on his head.
And isn't that what we all want this time of year? Is this PJ Fleck covered in mayonnaise?
I kind of want to get PJ Fleck on in the next couple of weeks. We'll see if we can do that. But let's do this first. We're going to go region by region. We're calling them regions, Landis. I think there's a lot I would like to borrow from the basketball tournament. I think March Madness showed us the way on how to do this. And I would like to think of this college football 12-team playoff more like March Madness than I would the NFL playoffs, right? Like I want to keep that college vibe. So I want to talk about regions. We would like to name this. I think we have to name this better than the 12-team playoff. I think we have to have a shorthand that we come up with. Maybe it'll be us. John is asking, and I will say this. I am 95% sure we're going to have a bowl pick'em for us to do with you guys as a group. And it might even be slightly cooler than just, going on Yahoo or ESPN.com and doing something. But that is the plan. We want to hang out with you guys, and we want you to outpick us. So we'll do it. I'll be in it. Bill will be in it. Producer Mike will be in it. We'll get Tishu in it, and we'll have a bowl pick'em pool. Right, Landis? For the people.
Yeah, we're definitely going to do it. And we got to do it fast because I didn't realize how early the first bowl games were.
Oh, my God.
West Virginia plays like next week.
On the 17th. Yeah, it's pretty wild. But let's talk about where we'll do this. I don't know that everybody's doing this. The most dangerous player. And I like the phrasing. This is one of those things where it's like, I like that phrasing, right? The most dangerous player, like, oh, watch out for this guy. But we have to limit our Georgia driving jokes, right? When we do something like this. So can we acknowledge that? Can we acknowledge that entire thing? We'll do them now. Yes. Right? We all get it, but now we can talk about ball. Is there anything else we want to add to the most dangerous player in each region?
I think we're covered. I think we're good. Yeah. I wasn't going to make that joke, but I'm sure a lot of people were, and you should, but we're not going to do it.
Yeah. We're going to acknowledge it. And then I also would like to, for the moment, we're naming the regions for the highest seed in that region, but I was trying to come up with the name. We're going to start with the Oregon region, but I was trying to come up with the name for this region and I got stuck. keep that phraseology in mind. Oregon, Ohio State, and Tennessee. So I was thinking we could call it the duck, buck, and then we need another word there that would describe our feelings about Tennessee, about an SEC team, that if we said the duck, buck, and I just couldn't think of another word that, wait, I got it. It's the duck, buck, and puck region because there's an NHL team in Tennessee.
I bet there's another word you could use.
So the duck, buck, and puck region, like if you were getting excited, like say that you were like really excited if you lived in Tennessee and you were really excited to go to a hockey game, you might say to your friend that you're going to the game with, you might say like, go puck yourself, right? Like that's what made me think of that. Like, oh man, like in Tennessee, they're fired up to play Ohio State, and for NHL games, it's the duck, buck, and puck region. In the duck, buck, and puck region, who is your most dangerous player?
Are you going to be mad at me for picking a Tennessee player?
No, we have to be honest here. Listen, we're going to honk about the honkers later on. People know what's up. That's the one thing the thing that makes me the maddest about all this stuff, and I should save it for the Cram-o-Meter, is when people are disingenuous. So like, you guys know where we're coming from, but we're not going to lie to you. We're not going to pretend that Tennessee doesn't have good players, right? We're also not going to do 50 minutes on Tennessee's defensive line on a show because that's not what we're about. But you are allowed to acknowledge that Tennessee has talented players because we need our northern audience to know that and understand that. We need our Ohio State audience to know that and understand it. You do you, Philly Billy.
Okay. So I mean, there are some obvious guys you can pick in all these ones. I tried to be a little less obvious with this pick. I picked Jermon McCoy. He is a cornerback for Tennessee. He's like the 5th highest graded coverage guy in the country. He is the highest graded coverage guy in this region. He has 4 interceptions. He has 8 pass breakups. He's played a little bit outside, or he's played a little bit inside. He's played mostly outside, but he has done both. And I thought that in a region that includes Ohio State's receivers and Oregon's receivers, maybe a defensive back who could throw a wrench in either one of those matchups could be particularly dangerous. So I went with Jermon McCoy. I was digging through some of the stuff from Tennessee's season. I don't know who Tennessee considers the best group of receivers that they faced this year, but they did play Alabama with Ryan Williams. In that game, Jermon McCoy was targeted 9 times in coverage. He gave up 3 catches for 16 yards. Against Ryan Williams specifically, he was targeted 5 times and allowed 1 catch for 5 yards. He's pretty stinking good. And when Ryan Day was talking about Tennessee on Sunday, of course, he talked about the defensive line, but he pretty quickly went to Tennessee's cornerbacks too. If I went to first blush film watch of the Vols, I think that position jumped out to him. So I'll pick one of those corners, and I'll roll with Jermon McCoy as a very dangerous man in this region.
Did you look by chance, ball knower Bill Landis? Did you look like how often he's in the slot versus how often he's outside?
Yeah, it's like 90-10. It's mostly outside.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because when I reveal my most dangerous player in this bracket, one of the reasons I picked this person was because I wasn't sure about Tennessee's capability to cover him in the slot. And my most dangerous guy is Emeka Egbuka for Ohio State. And part of this, so here's the thing. Like, of course, you can go like with the best player. This is something in between X Factor and best player, right? It's a really good primary player who has a chance to be awesome. But I didn't go with Jeremiah Smith here because we have talked about the idea of like big game Emeka Egbuka. I just want to, his targets by game, and you can talk me through this probably, Landis. In the middle of the year, when the Big Ten season started, he had 11, 11, and 10 targets in the first 3 Big Ten games of the year for Ohio State against Michigan State, Iowa, and Oregon. Since then, number of targets, 5, 3, 3, 4, 7, 8. And I don't know why he doesn't get the ball more. And we understand that Jeremiah Smith is Jeremiah Smith and Ohio State wants to run the ball. But when I look at Tennessee and I'm trying to figure out like who's going to handle that coverage in the slot, and I think it's some combination of Boo Carter and Christian Harrison, who seem fine. Mm-hmm. This feels like an opportunity for me for Emeka Egbuka, who came back for a fourth year at Ohio State, who at one point was the number one receiver in his class, who has been a leader for the Buckeyes, to go play the best football he's ever played in his life in his final games as an Ohio State Buckeye. And why wouldn't they do that? And it starts now. You know, if they get to Oregon again, that's a different conversation, right? Because I do think Oregon has capable people to deal with him. But maybe this is Emeka Egbuka plays the best football he's ever played.
Definitely possible. And also, like, for anyone who's watching or in the chat or whatever, like, of course you can pick Tej Johnson or James Pierce or Jeremiah Smith or Dylan Sampson. Like, I think we're
not a shot at those guys, right?
No, they're but a part of it for me is like, you know, they're good, right? So and like some of the guys we pick, you'll know they're good too. I wanted to go a little deeper than that if we could. But anyway, like, but Emeka Egbuka maybe for some people is pretty obvious because he's a very good player, but I think you bring up a good point about the inconsistencies with his targets this year. I think he is in line to be the focal point of Ohio State's offense, perhaps, as it goes through the postseason, because Ohio State wants to get on the perimeter more. It wants to get more creative with its run game, which may involve players who aren't running backs necessarily. And if that's the case, then Emeka Egbuka would be the first guy on that list to be involved there, I think. So, yeah, I think it's a great pick. I think it's worth pointing out. And what was it, before the Indiana game, we were talking about, you know, like big game Emeka, right? Like his production, I think that was in top 5 games, but this is a playoff game, so I think it applies. It's just like through the roof, and he scores more often than not when Ohio State plays in games like that. So I think you could have picked either Emeka or Jeremiah Smith, because I think Ohio State learned some hard lessons about not getting either one of those guys involved enough against Michigan. But they're definitely going to be the engine, I think, behind this playoff push for Ohio State.
Yeah, and I do think it's maybe more specifically against Tennessee. Brandon Johnson is a pretty good slot guy for Oregon, right? That's a different, but that would be a great matchup then. But I do think this might be, especially in a world where you're talking about Tennessee does have an elite guy outside who would be dealing with Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith, then maybe right. I think the best matchup for Ohio State potentially is inside, throwing the ball there. All right, before we reveal our picks in the Arizona State region, I'm going to give you, I'll give you mine first. No, I won't. I'm going to make you do trivia first. Are you ready for trivia? So don't reveal it yet, Mike. This is trivia. There are 6 running backs in the playoff who have gained 1,000 yards this season on the ground. Can you name them?
The 6 running backs in the playoff who have gained 1,000 yards on the ground. Yeah. So Cam Skattebo.
That is correct. He is second State with 1,569.
Phil Maffa at Clemson.
Oh, come on. Look at you. Number 6, Phil Maffa. 1,113.
I need to pull up who's in the playoff. Jordan James at Oregon.
Jordan James at Oregon is number 5, 1,254.
Dylan Sampson at Tennessee.
He's number 3, 1,482.
Ashton Jeanty.
Ashton Jeanty. He's famous. Ashton Jeanty is the leading rusher in the country, of course. So he is number 1 here at 2,496.
And the other one, I have his name, is Brashard Smith at SMU.
You just know that? You know that Brashard Smith is good?
I do, yeah, I know that he's good because I didn't pick him, but I wanted to pick him.
Okay, so you're good at your job. And then Jeremiah Love from Notre Dame is pretty close at 949. He certainly could be that kind of back if they gave him the ball a little bit more. So there we are, and I'm going to pick Phil Maffa in this region from Clemson, who Dabo Swinney was talking about going into the SMU game, was a little banged up and was not quite himself. He did emerge as the number 1 back last year. He still had almost 1,000 yards last year with Will Shipley in that backfield, but he's had some gigantic games, and he hasn't had he's been a little banged up and not quite himself lately. So part of this is a return to form for him. He has 6 games this year of 100 rushing yards, but in his last 4 games, 17 yards, 14 yards, 74 yards, 27 yards. So if he can get this kind of 2-week break here and be the guy who gained 171 yards against Louisville, even though they lost that game, who gained 154 against Florida State. I've liked Phil Maffa for a very long time. He's had a great progression of a career. 292 rushing yards as a freshman, 515, 966, 1113, and now he's the number one guy. But if he's at his best, I do think Clemson has a shot against Texas, but it has to be the best Clemson. And I think the best Clemson includes Phil Maffa, 20 carries for 150 yards.
Yeah, I think he's a really good player and doesn't get really no one on Clemson's offense gets talked about all that much, but no, he's solid. He's pretty explosive. He's old too, right? He's been around for a few years.
4th-year guy.
Yeah. So I like that pick.
All right.
I considered him. I picked another Clemson guy.
Okay. Because you're like, we're percolating on Clemson a little bit. Look at us giving Dabo respect.
I don't want to give Dabo respect, but also like him in his post-game press conference saying like, people say I'm a moron for not recruiting the transfer portal, and here we are. It's like, bro, you had the easiest schedule in the ACC.
Yeah. What if we called this region the Devil and Dabo?
Oh, yeah.
Because it's the Sun Devils.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's that? There's the movie.
And there's
about,
horns. There's horns too. You get horns.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We'll work on that. Yeah. Okay. So who's your? Let me work. The Devil and Daniel Webster, right? And there's another movie called Yeah. There's something here. There's a movie called The Devil and Mr. Jones. The Devil and Mr. Dabo. Yeah, we'll work on this. We'll have it for you by the playoff. Okay. Who's your guy though?
My guy's Bryant Wesco Jr. He is a freshman receiver for Clemson. He's actually their second leading receiver and has not been like a consistent part of the offense all year. He has 300-yard games. He had one in their second game against App State. He had another in September against Stanford. And then he didn't have another 100-yard game until the ACC championship, where he had 8 receptions for 143 yards and 2 touchdowns against SMU. The first touchdown was like a totally busted play. They like faked the quarterback run. Nobody covered Bryant Wesco, and he was all by himself and just kind of walked into the end zone. The second one was like a ball ripped down the seam where Wesco went off the line, immediately caught the ball between 2 defenders, basically got hit as he was catching the ball and got kind of pushed into the end zone. But I thought it was a pretty impressive play. And it does seem like maybe they're coming around to the idea of he needs to get the ball more. He has 21 targets in their last 2 games, 13 receptions for 209 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like I said, he was a freshman, like top 100 guy. Like there's been some really good freshman receivers around the country that have just been overshadowed, and I think rightfully so, by what Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams have done. But I think this is one of them, and we could be on the verge of maybe a Bryant Wesco breakout performance in the postseason for Clemson.
Okay. So we percolating on Clemson here? We wondering about this, like,
yeah,
because this is one of those things, right? Is it a correct statement that as mid as Clemson is, Texas has not beaten a team better than Clemson this year?
I think that's right. Yeah.
So this is where, I mean, it doesn't mean I think Texas shouldn't be in the playoff, and we get it. Like, the seeding is difficult, but now when you're evaluating stuff, it's like, okay, well, they beat Texas A&M and they beat Michigan, and it's like, well, Clemson's not great, but they're probably better than those teams. So
yeah.
Okay.
You also get I didn't realize this when it came out, like, but a lot of people did because it's kind of obvious. But Cade Klubnik versus Quinn Ewers is like,
oh yeah,
Texas Rockstar High School court. I think they faced off against each other in the state title game when Klubnik was South Lake Carroll. Is that right? And Ewers was, or maybe Ewers was South Lake Carroll. I can't remember. But that was like a huge deal when they played each other in high school. But Bryant Wesco is also from Texas. He's from Midlothian, Texas. So could have a QB wide receiver Texas duo doing a little something against the Horns in Austin.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're keeping our eyes peeled. We're keeping our eyes peeled there. So this is the Georgia region is next. I'm trying to think because you always do everything with Notre Dame is like Catholics versus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Catholics versus convicts, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like Catholics versus shovers, or like what is so we got to work this out, but we have 2 teams from Indiana and then a team that shoves people. So what we gotta We got to work it out. I'm sorry I didn't spend more time on this. I slept for 11 hours last night. How many hours did you sleep for?
About the same. Broken up by my 2-year-old waking up in the middle of the night, but otherwise it was pretty good.
Yeah, we were just very tired after our weekend in Indianapolis. So
there must be something like if you do like Catholic SIGs and something.
Oh yeah. I saw someone make a shirt that said Catholics versus cigarettes. Yeah. Right. When we were talking about the Catholics. Yeah. Right. Catholic SIGs and shoves. Yeah. Okay, we'll get there. Who's your person in this region, in the Georgia, Indiana, Notre Dame region?
This is a little more of an obvious one. This is Jeremiah Love for me, Notre Dame running back, who I guess there was some question as to whether or not he'd be healthy enough to play in the playoffs, but he is. Marcus Freeman said that he's going to play for the Irish here. I just think like he really flew under the radar this year for how explosive and dynamic he is, and he ended up not being a 1,000-yard rusher. He was just short of that at 949 yards. But he also had 206 receiving yards. There just aren't a lot of guys out there who are, pushing 1,000 rushing yards and are north of 200 receiving yards. So they get him involved pretty well in the passing game for a guy who runs as well as he does. And he's explosive. Of the 6 guys in the country with at least 900 rushing yards, he is one of 6 guys in the country with at least 900 rushing yards who are averaging 7 yards or better per carry. And he has 360-plus yard runs this year, which any other year would be like really high up on the list. It's just that Ashton Genty exists, so it's not because he has 10 because he's a monster. So Jeremiah Love is the X factor. I think very much in Notre Dame's offense. I think perhaps in this region he is the most explosive offensive playmaker.
Oh. See, this is we want to do some of this stuff, right? We're going to have a show where we do a lot of this stuff, where we are ranking stuff by playoff teams, and I think like most explosive playmakers in the playoff is a really interesting one. But that's no offense to Indiana, and we just know the reality with Georgia. I don't even know that that's in dispute. I mean, it's a great statement by you, but I'm saying I agree with it. Jeremiah Love.
Yeah, I don't like you might look at Elijah Surratt at Indiana. The 2 receivers at Georgia like have nice numbers, but when you look at like yards per route run and stuff like that, they're not very high up there. So,
okay. Well, I wound up with a Notre Dame guy as well, and this is again, it's a little bit of the Moffitt conversation of can he get back to what he is at his best, and this is Howard Cross, the defensive lineman for Notre Dame, who last year played at an All-American level, and this year has been out, but with an ankle injury, but Marcus Freeman said he is expected back for this playoff game. Mm-hmm. It's just a comparison, right? But for instance, last year his PFF grade was 89.8, which is through the roof. This year it's 70.3. Last year, in many more snaps, he had 39 pressures. This year he has 16. Last year he had 41 tackles. This year he has 14. It's just, again, what if Howard Cross is back to the best of Howard Cross? And I think even before he was hurt, he had a little bit of a rough start to the year, but I think he was like rounding into form and then he got hurt. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that at any point this year he's played as well as he did last year, but last year he's one of the best defensive tackles in the country. And if that's what you get, and now you are, what if he's the, again, Mikal Kamara is going to be dominant for Indiana. CJ West is going to be dominant on the inside for Indiana. Georgia always has dudes, but like, what if Howard Cross plays as well as any defensive lineman in this region? Like, I think that's huge for Notre Dame, because I do think both Indiana and Georgia are going to try to run the ball here. And so he's done it. He's been hurt. He'll be back. If he plays his best football, that's an incredible boost, I think, for Notre Dame.
Yeah, and you think about what's given Indiana problems. It's been stout defensive lines, and like in particular, like the middle of those defensive lines, and Notre Dame certainly has that. And then if you want to project forward to a Georgia matchup where you get like Tate Ratledge and Howard Cross going at it for 4 quarters, like I'll watch that. So he's very good. Maybe he's not quite been quite as good as he was last year, as you said. I think last year we didn't pick him for All North because there was some pretty stiff competition at defensive tackle, but he was definitely in that conversation.
Yes.
Just like from a grades and production standpoint. And I think he's still that same guy. And they have 2 with he and Riley Mills in the middle of that defensive line. So I think the interior too has been put in position to have to make a little more plays with some of the injuries that Notre Dame has had at edge as well. So yeah, they need the best out of Howard Cross in the playoff, no doubt.
It's just Devil Horns and Dabo. That's that region. Devil Horns and Dabo.
Devil Horns and Dabo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to watch that. Makes me want to watch that. Okay. So we have Ducks, Bucks, and Pucks, Devil Horns and Dabo, and we're working on the rest here. Okay. And we'll make shirts. Okay.
Producer Mike suggested Catholic SIGs and Corvettes, but I don't know. It probably should be like Catholics, Corvettes, and Dodge Chargers or something like that if we wanted to be more in line with reality.
We're finessing it. We'll finesse it. Last one here, the Boise State region. Who do you have in here? This is the Penn State, SMU, Boise State.
Yeah, I'm just I'm helping the agenda here. It's Abdul Carter, who I was going to lead the country in sacks.
Invented this category when we were talking about it. Yeah, this is like how you came up with like most dangerous man. Yeah.
So I think he's been great all year, right? He hasn't had the sack production that I thought he would, but he's third in the country in tackles for loss, so he's still getting after it. I thought he played well against Oregon. I guess he ended up not making a play in the backfield against Oregon, which is kind of surprising, but I think he still played well. I thought the attention that Oregon had to give him help Penn State in some other areas, but you just think about like singular defensive presences in this playoff and who might pop and be the guy who helps his team go on a run. Abdul Carter for me is definitely on that list. And there are some other guys in this region. There are actually 3 players in this region who have 50 plus pressures this year. It's Abdul Carter, who has 53. Ahmed Hassanin at Boise State has 54. And Elijah Roberts at SMU has 63, which I think might lead the country. Okay. Carter will move around a little more than those guys. Like he'll play linebacker, he'll play edge. They'll put him inside a little bit. So that was part of a separating factor for me too. But there are some pass rushers in this region that really get after it, which is going to be fun to watch. But Abdul Carter has been my guy all year, so I'll stick with him here.
I was glad you picked Abdul Carter. You said you considered the guy that I ended up picking, but like we like Abdul Carter invented this idea. So that I'll take Nick Singleton, the Penn State running back, who you thought in the Oregon game on Saturday night, like looked as good as he's ever looked. And again, like Ashton Jeanty is Ashton Jeanty, but if somehow we get a Boise State, Penn State game, and when Ashton Jeanty's running the ball and Nick Singleton runs the ball, like you're kind of like, I don't know, those guys are kind of close at least. Like that'd be a huge thing. Would it not? And he has that ability.
He does. He and Katron Allen both played really well against Oregon, but Singleton had been like really good at the start of the year. Then he was banged up and he missed some time. And just in the middle of the year, it really didn't feel like he was himself, and his production dropped like pretty, considerably. And this felt like a return to form against Oregon. He just looked very explosive and sudden, and was dangerous as a receiver and a rusher. So I think this is a great pick. And I'm glad you picked him because I think he deserves to be talked about. There are 8 players in the FBS in the 800 rushing, 300 receiving yard club. 3 of them are in the playoff, and Nick Singleton's one of them. 2 of them are actually in this region with he and Rashard Smith. Cam Scatabo is the other one. So
okay,
we can do both like that. Pretty impressive. I like Nick Singleton.
Guys with at least a minimum number of carries in the playoff. Best yards per carry in the playoff. Jadarian Price at Notre Dame, 7.2. Ashton Jeanty, Boise State, 7.2. Jeremiah Love, Notre Dame, 7.1. My God, Notre Dame can run the ball. Travion Henderson, Ohio State, 6.8. Nick Singleton, Penn State, 6.4. So, okay. All right. Those are our most dangerous folks. So do you want to cram it now? Want to do a little cramming?
Let's cram it.
Let's cram it. Welcome back to Troll Honk or Moron, part of the South Cram-o-Meter, and we would like to welcome our first official contestant to Troll Honk or Moron. It is Alabama Athletic Director Greg Byrne, who at least is paid to be a honk, right? You are, that's in your description. Now, I hope you're not a moron if you're the athletic director of one of the largest, most important athletic departments in the country. But this dude put out a statement on Twitter talking about how Alabama maybe won't schedule tough non-conference games in the future, and that will be bad for college football. based on the fact that schedule strength doesn't matter. And he got community noted on Twitter.
Sure did.
I don't know, like, what does Twitter still? I didn't even know Twitter still did community notes. And they were like, okay, there's a lot of crazy stuff that gets said on Twitter, but this is too far. Pretending that Alabama didn't make the playoff because they scheduled in the non-conference too difficultly. Like, it is wild. And this continued. This was like a huge discussion point among the whiny Bill. There's a great friend on Twitter who said, like, Doug, how did you not know this before? But it was a revelation for me how whiny Alabama fans, media, and administrators were about this. They have gotten every edge in college football in the modern era, most of them earned. But here's the thing, and I'm very happy with just like looking back. So we don't only look back on the things that we say that are right, but we look back on them more. And I did happen to tweet out our outrageous predictions show when I said Alabama will beat Georgia and miss the playoff, nailed it, and tweeted out when you said the Big Ten will get more playoff spots than the SEC, and the SEC will only get 3, and you couldn't have nailed it anymore. And again, you might have been the only person in the country saying that at that time. Come on, man. Come on. That was a good show for us.
That was pretty good. I'm off. I'm wrong quite often, so I'll take that one. Yeah.
We also said things on that show that were wrong, but like, you can go find those yourself. Like that, we're not going to send those back out to you. So I can't believe how whiny they are. But one of the things we talked about a lot in the preseason was I thought we were underestimating how much Alabama would miss Nick Saban and how much the SEC and the South would miss Nick Saban. And I think there is obviously a tangible part of that, Bill. But then I think there is a less definable part of that I also think is very reasonable. And if Alabama fans and administrators and media expect the benefit of the doubt, that is a Saban benefit of the doubt. That is a greatest college football coach of all time. I think that guy will have his team ready. Benefit of the doubt. That is not a get your doors blown off by Oklahoma, lose to Vanderbilt, Kalen DeBoer looks like he doesn't belong in the SEC. That benefit of the doubt is not the same. So if this is a rude awakening, you are more than the name on your jersey. You are people. You are talent. And a lot of times that gets applied in a negative way. It's the kind of thing that Kurt Cignetti's been saying all year. If Indiana's jerseys read Ohio State or Michigan, they might be treated differently. So often they're treated in a negative way. But this is a realistic way. Just because you're Bama doesn't mean you're the Bama of the last 20 years, because that dude's gone. And Saban, I guess understandably, is the honkiest honker there is about this stuff. But it's like, you left. It's your fault. You left. You're gone. There's not a transitive property here that what Nick Saban did means that Kalen DeBoer is going to do it, because Nick Saban wouldn't have lost to Oklahoma by 20, Bill. So the whining, oh my God, the whining. We joke around a lot. Listen, it's like we're here for our Northern fans and we like to tell the South to cram it. You know what is also true? There's a lot of great people who root for Southern teams, right? Met some lovely Tennessee guys in Indianapolis, met some lovely Alabama fans. They're individual. They're just people who are born into rooting for a team. A lot of us, right? You're born into it. You can't control where you're born. You can't control who your parents or your friends or your state likes to root for. So like, we're not going to call out like individual fans, except the ones who are on Twitter whining like babies. My God, you're insufferable. You insufferable Alabama fans. I'm sorry that Saban is gone, but welcome to reality. And this is reality.
Do you have any sympathy for the Alabama fans and administration who have now just been dealt the sobering reality that they were a man and not a program? Like, that's tough to deal with. I get why that'd be hard to wrap your mind around, but it's the truth.
They're good. They're not great. They're not great. They're not infallible. They're not perfect, but they don't get the benefit of the doubt. Do you?
No.
And I think it's possible. And I don't even know that I think this is corrupt or a black mark. I think it might be natural human instinct that if this was the exact same Alabama team that lost to Vandy and lost to Oklahoma, right? That this was this team, but Nick Saban was the coach, they might have gotten in.
I think so. Yeah. It would at the very least been a more difficult discussion, I think, for the committee, which seems like that was pretty difficult for them already.
And I'm not saying from my view that it should have been, but I would understand the human impulse to take that into account because people, I think the decision about who gets in the playoff should be based on what you've done. But we already saw with Florida State that they project. So if now you sit in projection, it's like, okay, well, actually, who has a better chance to do something in the playoff, SMU or a Nick Saban coached team? I don't think you should take that into consideration. But if you are, it's like, okay, well, he's Nick Saban. This is not that, bro. So, are you surprised? Like, am I going to be surprised by the whininess of Alabama fans in the South? Are you as surprised?
I'm not surprised about the whininess necessarily because, like, I get it. Like, the team that's in that spot is always going to be pretty upset. And how often moving forward will that actually be Alabama? I'm not sure. So, like, that amplifies it probably more than it would be otherwise. The choice of messaging I found puzzling. Like, the non-conference schedule thing just didn't make any sense. Because that's not why Alabama's in the position that it found itself in. Like, Oklahoma wasn't a non-conference game, right? Go beat Oklahoma. You were favored by 3 scores. So, like, that to me, it's like and maybe that's what they settled on as the argument because they had no other argument they felt was compelling enough on their own behalf to get into the playoff. But like that should fall on deaf ears because, like, who cares? You played Western Kentucky, South Florida, Wisconsin, and Mercer. Like, get out of here with that argument.
So we were very excited and remain very excited about these non-conference games that Alabama has scheduled, home and homes, starting with Wisconsin. They also have it against Ohio State. They also have it against Notre Dame. They also have it against West Virginia. I hope those are played.
Also, didn't the team that took their spot, SMU, do so because it's scheduled tough, like it's scheduled BYU? Didn't that help SMU's case?
If SMU had lost to BYU and then BYU had gone 3-9, maybe SMU wouldn't have gotten in.
Yeah.
So, and that's a lot of these things too. And I think there's some people making good points about you. For instance, you look like Indiana played the 2 teams that played for a national title last year. They played Michigan and Washington. And so it's like, oh, Indiana didn't have to play anybody. It's like, did everybody know that Washington and Michigan were going to win 6 games and 7 games the year after playing for the national title? And like, if that's not Indiana's fault. So to be like, oh, Indiana didn't have to play Penn State or Oregon, it's like, they played. So there's a lot of this that you can think you know who's going to be good, and then you're always surprised by some things, both good and bad. You could look at Notre Dame's schedule. They played Florida State and USC. Who would have thought that Florida State's like, oh, Notre Dame didn't play anybody. They played Florida State and USC. It's not their fault. One of those teams was awful and one of those teams was mid, when actually they were both easily top 25 teams in the preseason. So obviously schedule strength is a component, but then if you try to expand it to like, well, you didn't even try, I think sometimes that discussion can get off. And so if this is their plan of like, well, we're not even going to try because what's the point? I think if they go too far with that, then I think that'll bite them in the butt because as many people have pointed out, strength of schedule is the only reason these 9-3 teams were even in the mix. No 3-loss teams from any other conferences were in the mix. So the fact that you were in consideration is a nod to your schedule strength. And if Ole Miss hadn't lost to Kentucky or Alabama hadn't lost to Vanderbilt or Oklahoma, both of those teams would have been so in, it wouldn't have even been a discussion.
Yeah.
And that has nothing to do with Kirby Smart complaining about playing too many tough games in the SEC or making threats about the non-conference. As you pointed out, and I think we all know, South Carolina, Ole Miss, and Alabama, the 3 teams in the discussion at 9-3, went 12-0 in the non-conference. And the best win was South Carolina over Clemson. The second best win was Alabama over Wisconsin. So, like, whatever that discussion is, isn't it weird? It is weird they landed on that, as you said. That was their primary point.
Because I guess there's nothing. I think it is truly that there's nothing else, right? So, and that, it's very strange to me because the strength of schedule is like we're good, and I actually think respected. But I don't know. They didn't know how to process what happened to them, I guess. So that's the path they chose.
Yeah, so they can cram it. Yeah. So
even though last year Alabama got in because Florida State got screwed, but we won't talk about that.
And I'm old enough to remember, like I remember watching like Ohio State as the Big Ten champ not get in to a 14 playoff because Alabama as a non-champ got in ahead of them, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, what are we like? So like they're so accustomed to that. It's a cold splash of water in the face.
Yeah.
But it's not good to hate people, right? It's just not a healthy way to live. And I know that you could look at me and say, that is a man who hates people. I try not to hate people. I do. Well, I don't know if I actually, for the purposes of this discussion, let's say that I try not to hate people, but I do hate people's actions. And so I will say, as a group, I hate the actions of Alabama fans, administrators, and media after Alabama didn't get in, which means you can cram it. Let's go to the graphic. I forgot to do it in week 1 because I'm a terrible podcast host and YouTube show host. And I thought, oh, wait, we should do this. We didn't do it. Week 2, scale of 1 to 1,000. How hard can the South cram it? Week 2, 815. Week 3, 975. Week 4, 910. Week 5 is the first time we broke it. Not our fault. They made us break it, 1,200. Week 6, 1669. Week 7, we went to 6.5 million. Again, they deserved it. Week 8 on the Cram-o-Meter, 459,000. Week 9, backed it off, proving that we don't always have to go over 1,000, 652. Week 10, 45,000. Week 11, over 1 million. Week 12, 252,000. Week 13, 1.85 million. And week 14, Brett Bielema's face. And Mike did it. Mike is killing it on the graphics today. Last week, we agreed that Brett Bielema did the cramming on our behalf, so we didn't need a cram-o-meter because he crammed Lane Kiffin in a trash can. And for perpetuity, anytime anyone goes back to the first year of the cram-o-meter and says, I wonder what the cram-o-meter was at week 14, the answer is Brett Bielema's face.
A smiling Bert.
Smiling Bert. So how hard can the South cram it this week? What's your number?
I actually considered doing a 0 as like a point to point out, I guess, how little their whining matters.
Oh, that would be, yeah.
That
would be, I get it.
Yeah. But I don't want to have to explain that every time people go back and check the record. So it's 2 million, which is roughly what Greg Byrne makes. 2 million.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. That's very good. I always prepare this a little bit less than you do, and you are just excellent at it. So I think this might be the last. Can I look real quick here? I'm trying to figure out how much the SEC paid out in TV money to its schools. And it's $51.3 million for maybe the last year that we have available. So if that's the case, that's the number. What I'll do. Okay. I'm going to do 51.3 million because the point is, if they had not rated the Big 12, Bama would be in because Texas took a spot and Oklahoma beat Alabama. So that's your problem. It's not non-conference scheduling. It's realignment. And this is one of those things. We'll have a show later this week where we talk about ways to maybe improve the playoff right now and some of the seeding and that kind of things. But we just have to remember that this was built and originally designed in a world that doesn't exist anymore. And Bill, if we are in a world where if we had kept conferences as they were, Texas would have won the Big 12 and Oregon would have won the Pac-12. And then you would have had Georgia. And then you would have had Penn State or Ohio State, right, in the Big Ten. And those would be the 4 top seeds in this playoff. And nobody would be complaining about Boise State and Arizona State being top seeds. That's what they thought they were doing. And it made sense in that world. And then that world exploded and they didn't change enough of the details and the intricacies of the playoff as a result. But if they had changed them, people would have said, you're already changing it before you even let it play out. But now we've seen it play out. And it's like, okay, Boise State and Arizona State getting buys. Is that really the world we want to live in? But if it was Texas, Oregon, Georgia, Penn State, nobody would be complaining, Bill.
Yeah, no. And they will change it, right? That'll happen I have no sympathy for the folks who want to complain about the system that they created, like biting them back a little bit. And so deal with it.
So our two numbers are 53.1 million plus 2 million. So we will average that and then put that at week 15 right under Brett Bielema's head on the Cram-o-Meter chart for posterity. I think children will study this in their textbooks, in their college football textbooks, right?
Well, it's like they teach the Civil War differently, like up here than they do down south, right? So maybe they'll talk about it differently in Southern textbooks than they do in Northern textbooks. True. But it'll be there.
Mr. Landis,
it'll be called the meter of Northern aggression.
You can't say that stuff. You can't say that stuff when I'm sick. Oh my God. My wife couldn't stop talking about how you talked about I could fart in my hand and smell it. She said she couldn't get over it. She thought it was the funniest thing she ever heard. The meter of Northern aggression. Oh my God. Mr. Landis, why is week 14 Brett Bielema's face? And then you just go to the chalkboard. Let me explain this. Lane Kiffin. And then, oh my God. I think we have people in the chat who would sign up for this. Right? People would sign up for this. Would you sign up for a college football class taught by Bill Landis that is specifically about the meter of Northern aggression? It's like, because you can't teach all of college football history. You have to zero in.
Yeah.
Right? Oh my God. People, I appreciate that people in the chat are talking about I'm calling him DJ Pickleman. I know that's not his name. DJ Pickleman and Josh Paste, because my wife thought it was funnier if I did DJ instead of JD, because that's also more wrong. So, and then DJ Pickleman sounds like it's like when you were can you tell people the story about the guy who you were at? He's the Big Ten DJ that also was at a wedding that you were at.
It wasn't that. It was he DJ'd my brother's wedding. Yeah,
he DJ'd your brother's wedding.
DJ Yoshi, who does the in-house DJ at Lucas Oil Stadium for the Big Ten Championship, also DJ'd my brother's wedding, because like my brother knows him through a friend of his who got married to DJ Yoshi's cousin and like did their wedding, and then he did my brother's wedding. But it was great. Yeah, the guy who did I think he does Big Ten basketball and football, did my brother's wedding, and I just walked up to him and I said, "You're DJ Yoshi," and he was like shocked at anybody, like I knew who he was.
Yeah,
it was like, I've been to many Big Ten championships where you've been on the 1s and 2s, and it's been a great time. So I appreciate you doing this for my brother's wedding.
Yeah. So I like to think of like DJ Yoshi. That's how I think of DJ Pickleman. So DJ Pickleman, though, if you hire him to work your wedding, he just plays Sweet Home Alabama on a loop. It's like, oh my God. That's the 29th Sweet Home Alabama that you've played tonight. It's like, that's the only song I've got. I'm sorry. So DJ Pickleman and Josh Paste. I think Josh Paste actually maybe was more straightforward about what happened in the playoff discussion. So I want to be fair. He's still boring, but I want to be fair to the people out there. Okay. When we come back, we have a bunch of other stuff to talk about, including Purdue hiring a new coach. We'll do that next on Kings of the North. I'm never going to get over the meter of Northern aggression. I just realized I'm going to be thinking about that on my deathbed. On my deathbed, I was thinking about my family and the meter of Northern aggression. Okay. Purdue hired Barry Odom, UNLV coach, former Missouri coach. What do you think?
I think he's a really good football coach. He is more like established and I would say successful as a head coach, maybe that I was expecting Purdue to be able to get. Like Jeff Monken would have been the same from Army. I am surprised they went defense. I thought for sure they might go offense. I thought they may even go younger. But if Barry Odom brings Brennan Marion with him, the offensive coordinator at UNLV, then I think Purdue might have checked off sort of both boxes of like, give me a program builder and a guy who's done this, but also give me the innovative, exciting offense that's run by a young guy. So I don't know if Brennan Marion's going to come. He was not named the interim coach for UNLV in its bowl game, which I found interesting because I think he would have been if he were definitely staying there. So if you're giving me both of them, I really like it. And if you're only giving me Barry Odom, like I still kind of like it, but I am a little surprised they went defense.
So if you are not entirely familiar with UNLV, it's the go-go offense from Brennan Marion. Can you give people a 10-second description of the go-go offense?
Yeah, I mean it's more run based than it is passing based, which might like sound counterintuitive when you think of go-go. Like they try to play fast, they do a lot of two-back stuff, a lot of quarterback run game, and that's probably it. Like a lot of shots down the field too. So it's like run the set up explosive passes, but it's heavy run. It's like 60% run. But in a way that is fast and exciting and not like deliberate and boring.
So I think there's probably two things here, right? One is I don't think you have to bring Brennan Marion to bring the go-go offense. So Brennan Marion was a Texas assistant. He was a really good receiver in college football, and he got his first chance to be an offensive coordinator when Barry Odom hired him at UNLV. So I think, that already shows that Barry Odom is willing to be aggressive with an offensive hire as a defensive coach. So if it's not Brennan Marion and it's not the go-go offense, I would expect it to be an aggressive hire of a guy who's going to be innovative and get after it with an exciting brand of offense. And I don't know enough about the ins and outs of the UNLV offensive staff, but I would imagine there is probably somebody else on that staff, if Brennan Marion doesn't come, that Barry Odom could bring that offense.
Yeah.
So
or even just, that, or just like, and like there are other teams running like exciting kind of spread option type offenses, right? It doesn't have to be the go-go necessarily. Like, a version of like what Billy Fritz was doing at Tulane. If there's someone there, you can maybe bring some of that to Purdue too. But I think you make a really good point. And actually, I wanted to say that, so I'm glad you did. It's like Barry Odom is defense all the way and has had very good defenses. UNLV is also awesome on special teams, which I think is just an indicator of a very well coached team, and wants to push the envelope offensively, even if it's not his forte, which I honestly think a lot of defensive coaches probably would be the opposite of that, right? They want to play ball control and keep their defense on the field. Not so much for Barry Odom.
We're just theorizing here. UNLV is a very good football program. It is not a Power 5 football program. I would imagine, I hope that like some of this, that if a coach is as established as Barry Odom is going to come to Purdue, he's going to get some assurances about NIL. It's not the same as James Madison. UNLV I think, is probably a step up from James Madison. But do you think that we could see some important players from UNLV come to Purdue and do the Cignetti model?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. Like, I don't know all the eligibility ins and outs there of who has years left.
Is Haj Malik Williams going to be Purdue's quarterback next year?
Yeah,
would you
potentially.
want him to be? Would you be in favor of that?
I wouldn't hate it. Yeah, that would be his third school. He came to UNLV from Campbell. Like I don't know if Jackson Woodard has eligibility left. Like he's the Mountain West Player of the Year. He's a linebacker for UNLV. I don't know that Ricky White has eligibility left, but he was in the Big Ten originally. He was at Michigan State before he went to UNLV. And he's a heck of a receiver and a special teams player. So yeah, there's some potential there to bring players. UNLV won 10 games, right? To bring players from a team that won 10 games to Purdue. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're in on it. The other thing is, so I think so a defensive coach who is willing to be aggressive with an offensive hire. I mean, you just think about, right, what's the greatest thing that in the modern era that happened to Purdue football is Joe Tiller. And so Joe Tiller, basketball on grass, let's get after it. If this can conjure some of those even a little bit for Purdue fans, I think that would be incredible. Barry Odom, I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert on Barry Odom, but he played at Missouri and then got promoted to be the head coach at Missouri at age 38. This is one of those situations, again, when Gary Pickle resigned for some health reasons. I think it probably was are we sure Barry Odom's ready for the job, but we can't let him out of the building. He's our guy. We've got to give it to him. And then it didn't go great. 4-8, 7-6, 8-5, 6-6. And he got fired at Missouri in 4 years at his alma mater, at his dream job. You could look at it, and 2 years before him, they won double-digit games, and 4 years after him, they won double-digit games. And he was like a 500 coach there. So it's like, well, why did Gary Pinkel could win and Eli Drinkwitz could win, but Barry Odom couldn't win? I think that's reasonable. That's a reasonable thing to ask. He since has said things like maybe they weren't all the way there with like acquiring talent and things like that. He has said that if in the NIL era, he thinks they would have been in a better position. But anyway, he tried it and it didn't work. But then at stop 2, it did work. He went 9-5 and 10-3 in 2 years at UNLV. It worked. So I think maybe what Purdue winds up with here is a guy who's done it, who probably was a little too young when he first took over, learned some lessons, is a defensive guy, I think has a good defensive reputation. He was a defensive coordinator at Missouri, then was the defensive coordinator at Arkansas in between the Missouri and UNLV stops. Now has maybe figured it out, is willing to be aggressive on offense, and frankly is probably a better resume hire than I expected for Purdue. Now, I had Jeff Monken on my list, and Jeff Monken I think is a similar resume, but like to come from UNLV, I think is even like probably a better spot than to come from Army. No offense to Army. So I'm kind of surprised they got him, and go see what happens.
We talked about him more maybe for West Virginia, right? When we were pondering some candidates, because there was there's some connection there between Barry Odom and the AD now at West Virginia. So I agree. I think the resume is probably a little better. It's certainly different than I thought they were going to go for, because if they did go this route with a sitting head coach who's just trying to move up in the world, I thought it would have been Monken, but it sounds like he was part of that search at the very least. But I wonder how much like Barry Odom's experience with building a roster the way he's going to have to build it at Purdue might have helped him over someone like Jeff Monken, who just doesn't have to do that and can't do that at Army because of their roster rules. So I think it's pretty solid. Like I especially if they can get the offensive piece right, whether that's Brennan Marion or somebody else, because like Purdue's program identity for a long time has been offense with Jeff Brom and Joe Tiller, but that doesn't mean you just sort of like let defense fall by the wayside. Like that was the other side of the coin for Purdue. It was like they still stunk on defense. Right. If you can try to get both here, and when you had Ryan Walters, you thought you were getting at least good defense, and you kind of got neither. So that needed to change, and I think Barry Odom gives them a decent chance of finding that balance.
And I even think it's interesting if you had just hired him after the Missouri didn't work out. And it's like, okay, was that just because he was too young and it was at his alma mater and there was a bunch of pressure? Like, we think it'll work out here, but I don't know. Maybe he's just not cut out to do this. But they're getting him after like UNLV kind of showed, no, I think he can do this. Right. So I think it's like a really good, it doesn't seem risky for Purdue. I don't know if it's going to be a moonshot, but like it doesn't. It seems like a pretty high floor to get a guy who's been a 6-year head coach in the SEC and the Mountain West, and just was in a conference championship game, and he's going to Purdue. It's like great, okay. So
how much do you think? How much do you think like Indiana hiring an experienced head coach led to Purdue trying to do the same rather than going like the up and coming coordinator?
I think it's probably more related that Ryan Walters was the up-and-coming coordinator, that in their own house they experienced it the other way. But I think Cignetti's reassuring. And then it's one of those things. Do you want the Cignetti model, or do you want to take another swing again at a young and up-and-comer model that did work for a place like Syracuse and Fran Bramwell, which you talked about a million times, right? So, but I think more it's like we want a little more certainty when your Ryan Walters swing, which I understood and liked at the time, didn't work. So let's get a guy who's done this before. So, okay. That's the only Power 4 head coaching move. We'll have a couple others to talk about. I do want to talk about the Wisconsin offensive coordinator hire, though. Jeff Grimes, taken from Kansas. Kansas promotes Jim Zabrowski, keeps it in-house. But for Wisconsin, they fired Phil Longo, who had been a quarterback's coach his whole life, and they hired Jeff Grimes, who has been an offensive line coach his whole life. And again, this is how it works. You swing from one way to the other. But do you think what Wisconsin should be doing, getting back to its offensive line roots?
Stylistically, yes. I wonder if there was a better candidate to get them there. Like to fire Phil Longo when Wisconsin did, and presumably get a jump start on the coordinator market, and then to make this hire lands a little flat for me. And it's not, I don't think this should be the ultimate barometer on any hire, but I also think it can be somewhat significant. I don't think Kansas fans were too upset that Jeff Grimes left.
No, he was the 1-year OC. for Kansas after Andy Koltelnicki took the Penn State job. And I think they were sad when Andy Koltelnicki left, but especially in the first half of the season, it's like, what is happening with this Kansas offense? And to their credit, they got it together in the second half of the year. But again, I think you're right. So this is, again, this is one of those long goes the swing, didn't work. This is a safe pick. Established, offensive line oriented, and like a good solid hire, but it feels like a little more in line of like a Tim Lester hire than like a let's really try. But maybe that's, and again, this is one of those things. I was so into like Wisconsin's not settling. They want to be more. They don't want to settle for being Iowa. And then they went through this for 2 years, and I think they've now reached points like, actually, I think maybe we do want to be Iowa. And then it's like, well, if you wanted to be Iowa, why'd you fire Paul Chryst to begin with? So it's like we're back. We're looping in the Wisconsin search here. But if the end result is Luke Fickell is a better version of Paul Chryst rather than trying to be an opposite version of Paul Chryst, maybe that's the version of success they're looking for.
Yeah, and I think Jeff Grimes is certainly a lean back toward what Wisconsin has been traditionally, but there's some passing production in his background too that is a little different. Like I think he was a Broyles Award finalist in 2020 when he was at BYU and they had Zach Wilson. So they'll throw it when he has the right players there. And I think it's right to lean back toward physicality. I think it's right to lean back toward offensive line. Maybe there could have been a more inspiring decision than this one. And I think like there's some good in Grimes' background too, but I also believe this is his 5th job in 11 years, and he was fired at Baylor before he went to Kansas. Like,
okay,
I don't know. Right? It's not the most exciting resume. And I do think if you're looking at Luke Fickell, I think honestly making a hire that will decide his future at Wisconsin, I'm surprised this wasn't a bigger swing.
Okay. 2 other head coach moves that we want to touch on at least briefly because it's Northern guys leaving the North. Charles Huff, after Marshall won a conference championship game, and Tim Albin after Ohio won a conference championship game. Charles Huff leaves Marshall for Southern Miss. Tim Albin leaves Ohio for Charlotte. And I want to read briefly, and I do think like what the hometown papers say here matters and stuff like this, because in the end, that's sort of the last vestige of like when you are the sort of the hometown paper, you're standing up for your fans, right? That is your responsibility. You are not beholden to coaches or players. You are beholden to your readership and the fans and the people who care about this college football program, regardless of what happens there. And Eric, at the Athens Messenger, I thought this was interesting. This is part of what he wrote about Tim Albin leaving. In one of the more shocking twists in recent college football memory, Ohio had a 20-year employee who had consistently stressed the importance of things like accountability and responsibility leave the program before the buses could even get back to Athens. So, like, I think that maybe reflects a little bit of like what Ohio University football fans are feeling right now. Offensive coordinator Brian Smith is going to coach Ohio in the bowl game. It always is tough, Landis, when things like this end. They won their first conference championship since 1968, and the coach left hours later. That's tough. I have yet to find the perfect way for a head coach to leave for another job. I don't know that the perfect way to leave exists. So this just might have to be how the business works. And often when you leave on the back of success, you leave your previous fans hurting after your departure.
I think the thing that is probably difficult to process for Ohio fans and difficult for me as well is like, I'm not sure he left for a better job. I think he left for more money. And if you want to say like more money equals better job, like I guess I won't fight you on that, but I don't think that's always true. Charlotte is messy. Charlotte is like kind of in its infancy still as a program.
Yeah.
I don't think it has a ton of upward mobility in the American Athletic Conference. And Tim Albin could have stayed at Ohio and kept chasing MAC championships, I think, until something better came along. So it's a hard job in the MAC. Like we've talked about that and how much that roster turned over, and he did an incredible job to get to a MAC title in the face of that. So like I understand not wanting to deal with that year over year, certainly, but I think he will find the Charlotte job to be maybe as difficult and perhaps for different reasons. So that was the part of it for me. It's like, really, that's the one you left for. So, but I'm not surprised that he kind of tried to cash in on winning a MAC title.
So congratulations to Charles Huff and Tim Albin for conference titles. Congratulations on your new jobs, and we don't care about you anymore. Mm-hmm. So that's just how it works. Do you want to go to the portal?
You want to do Whittingham? You want to do Whittingham first?
Oh, yeah, you do want to do Whittingham.
Yeah.
This ties in with some portal stuff. Kyle's staying. So John Sumrall at Tulane did the Leonardo DiCaprio meme. Mm-hmm. What's that movie from?
Wolf of Wall Street.
What's Eating Gilbert Grape?
It's from What's Eating Gilbert Grape. Yeah.
Wolf of Wall Street. So John Sumrall, in staying at Tulane when he had been a candidate for various jobs, did that. Kyle Whittingham, I don't know that would fly at Utah. Wolf of Wall Street. If you haven't seen Wolf of Wall Street, it's like I would be.
It might fly in Salt Lake City. It wouldn't fly in Provo, but it might fly in Salt Lake City.
I would be curious sometime, like if somebody used a different meme from Wolf of Wall Street to announce that they're coming back, like maybe the elevator, and it's like, hey, and it's like, oh my God, that's the wrong meme. Kyle Whittingham just did what's that meme? He just did he did a statement, and the statement was, I'm back. Who did that?
That was Michael Jordan.
Oh, that was Michael Jordan. Oh, so like you choose who are you more like Leonardo DiCaprio, a debauched penny stock trader, or are you more like the greatest athlete of our generation? Oh yeah, I'm back. Kyle Whittingham.
That also felt a little bit like I didn't monitor the reception to that, but it felt a little bit like a read the room situation. Like
with
Michael
Whittingham?
Jordan. Yeah, Michael Jordan is Michael Jordan. And to like compare I don't know, like Kyle Whittingham probably had nothing to do with it, but for the social team to use the Jordan style I'm back announcement for a guy that just had like the worst season he's had in a decade is like, I don't know that that's the energy we're looking for here.
Right. And you were in charge of it. That would be like if the Bulls went like 21-61, and then people were like, I wonder if Michael Jordan's going to leave as a free agent. And he was like, I'm back. That's not what that was.
Jordan averaged 10 points per game. Yeah.
So it is weird. It's like Kyle Whittingham said he's not just going to do what's best for him. He's going to do what's best for the program. And it feels like the program's on fire. And he's like, I'm not going anywhere. And it was like, I sort of felt like, and we'll talk about it in a second in the portal, that maybe a lot of the things that were happening was leading toward this is a transformational moment for Utah football. We're going to reset things. And that's going to include Morgan Scalley taking over as the head coach in waiting. And instead it's like, no, Kyle Whittingham's going to stay. He's earned that. Right. I mean, I do think he's earned that. And I don't think he's over the hill. Oh, my God, this guy has lost it. I don't think it's that. And so if it's more like, I don't want to leave the program in this shape so that Morgan Scalley is taking over after a bad Utah season, I want to get things straightened out and then I'll leave. If that like that, you would respect. And maybe he doesn't want like a very disappointing season to be the last part of his legacy. I get that, but I kind of thought he was going to leave and retire.
Yeah, no, I thought he was too. And I don't know. I actually think you can make a pretty compelling argument that it would have been better for the program for him to leave now off of that weird year, but it certainly would have been better for him. So like, I don't know that he's doing this in the best interest of the program, or if he's doing it in the best interest of himself so he can have a good year before he leaves.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it'll be a bad year, because I think he is still a very good coach. And this year got away from him. Like, their defense was still good. Like, they're still Utah in a lot of ways, right? So if they can get the offense right, and they did hire a new offensive coordinator, Jason Beck from New Mexico.
They did.
Is gonna run that offense now. So if they can get that right and get that turned around, then I don't think Utah's gonna fall off a cliff. But it did feel like maybe like a natural time for Kyle Whittingham to hand it over. But I definitely understand why he did not, because who wants to go out like that when you've been so successful?
Yeah. So and there were reports that offensive coordinator hire was sort of done by Kyle Whittingham and Morgan Scalley together. So good luck to him. I mean, the guy's great at this. So I don't, I mean, like he's not at the point of like hanging on too long. It's definitely not that. So let's see what Utah can do. And we'll move into Utah news in the portal, because the deal with this Utah is they have no quarterbacks left. Now, I guess Cam Rising might stay for an 8th year. I actually think that probably would not be the best thing for Utah, but by reports, Isaac Wilson, the freshman who wound up starting a bunch of games this year, who we liked in the spring, felt like the future of the position. Zach Wilson's brother, right? Did you not think Isaac Wilson was a pretty good guy to be the future of the quarterback position at Utah?
Yeah, definitely. I just think it turns out he wasn't ready to do that as a true freshman, which is also understandable, right? But
so it feels like they kind of screwed that up, and the result was like they had a bad year, but also they lost the guy. But Brandon Rose and Sam Heward, who are the other quarterbacks on their roster, are also reportedly also going in the portal. So they I think have Cam Rising and almost literally no other scholarship quarterbacks on the roster if that happens. Which leads us to Devin Brown, the Ohio State backup quarterback, who has announced that he is entering the portal, but will stay around for the playoffs, which you admire. And I do think some people, I don't know that this is a big deal, but you sort of have to announce it now to just ride with your team through the playoff and then think about portal stuff. You have to let teams know
it's too late,
that you're out there. So, but then also to be like, oh, I'm not like mad at my team. I'm not get me out of here. I'm not bailing on my guys. I just have to literally, because of the schedule this sport has made, I have to announce it. But then I'm also locked in. And if my team needs me, I'm going to be ready to go. So I think it's just kind of forced on these guys, but clearly Devin Brown is staying. But where did Devin Brown go to high school as last year? High school? What state was it in?
He went to the same high school as Isaac Wilson, Corner Canyon in Draper, Utah. He's not from there. He's from Arizona. But he has spent time in Utah, and I think it's a very obvious connection to make. My only question for Utah would be is like Devin Brown doesn't have much experience. He's made one start. He's played some backup roles. Like he was involved a little bit in the game plan last year as a number 2 quarterback as more of like a running threat, but that's not a guarantee that you're going to get good quarterback play is what I'm saying. There's really not a whole lot there for you to be banking that on other than his recruiting profile, which by the time you would get him, if you did get him, was 3 years ago.
Right. I think it'd be a good swing though. I would take him. If I were Utah and Devin Brown, I would take Devin Brown and say, you're the starting quarterback. I would not. You
wouldn't want more of a sure thing. If you think this is might be Kyle Whittingham's last dance, to compare him more to Michael Jordan, you wouldn't want a more established, experienced quarterback.
I mean, you thought it was going to be Isaac Wilson. So, right. I mean, I would almost just think of it as more like you're getting ready to play a highly ranked guy who's been waiting his turn.
The other thing,
you're saying go get a veteran starter. You're saying more go get a guy who's coming from some Caden Salter or something, right? Go get somebody who's played a couple years.
I'm probably saying like go get Devin Dampier, who was the quarterback in New Mexico, and just bring him to Utah and run New Mexico's offense. I like Devin Brown's personality. I just don't. I think as a player, he's not what Utah should be swinging for, especially if they're going to try to run a similar offense to what Jason Beck ran last year, which does a lot of like quarterback run game. And it's very much predicated on having an athletic quarterback. I don't know that Devin Brown's that guy. So like there's the obvious connections, but I would go a different direction before I would come back around to Devin Brown if I'm Utah.
Do you think Devin Brown is good enough for somebody in the Power 4 to say you're our guy?
Not a high level Power 4 team.
Okay.
No.
Interesting.
Maybe a lower level Power 4 team.
Did you already do research for the Thursday show? What are you, 3 shows ahead on me? What are you doing here?
I haven't. I haven't.
You just have this in your head. You just have a portal. Your head is a portal.
I mean, I've been
stats.
There's so much portal crap happening. The only little bit that I do try to make some room for in my mind is the quarterback stuff. So yeah, okay. Caden Salter, Devin Dampier, Darian Mensah from Tulane.
In the portal. Yeah.
Like,
get that guy north.
Sorry, Devin Brown. Like, you're just not as exciting as those guys.
Okay. All right. Another guy who's in the portal has been in for a couple days. Like everybody at Purdue is going to be in the portal. It's just the reality. It doesn't mean that it just like this is what happens, right? When you have a bad year and you change coaches, it just all bets are off. But Dylan Thieneman, who's one of the best safeties in the country and was a revelation as a freshman in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to get out over my skis here, but is he the closest thing to Caleb Downs that might be in the portal this year in terms of like a young safety who can come in and like reshape your defense?
I think it is highly possible that Dylan Thieneman, when this process is over, ends up being viewed as the best player in the portal.
Okay. He was like a freshman All-American. Revelation, just like Caleb Downs was. Like a revelation. revelation. Makes me want to go back and look. Were they the 2 safeties on every freshman All-American team in the country in 2023? I think they might have been, probably, right?
Without looking. I would assume so, yeah. But
so
Dylan
anyway,
Peterman also left the door open, like a lot of Purdue transfers, to like waiting and see what happens with the defensive hire, or the head coach hire, which now happens to be a defensive guy.
Yeah. So that'd be great. I mean, that's where you start, right? When you're rebuilding your roster, you start with the own guys that you really like, that you want to keep. So
Max Clare
doesn't mean he's gone.
Too, tight end.
The tight end went to so like
the 2 best players on Purdue's team. Yeah.
Which is just part of it. Like it doesn't mean that you can't, this is just one of those things, the way it works. That can't be the reason to not fire Ryan Walters.
Oh no.
You can't long for continuity. You can't long for bad continuity. Oh, I wish we could keep our 2 best players from our horrible team is not a thing that people say. So like enough to not make the decision. You can say it. You should want to keep your 2 best players from your terrible team, but fixing the terrible team comes first. And if that means losing the 2 best players, so be it. But this is a big deal. Clare and Thieneman are instant impact guys for any team, including for Purdue. And this is one of these things. Back to this conversation. Purdue could absolutely make a bowl next year. No doubt about it. Purdue could go 6-6 next year. Are you kidding me? That's 1,000% chance of that. So this is like, if you're a Purdue fan, this is not like I don't think it gets worse from here, right? It's just that you made a hire that didn't work and everything went wrong. You know, everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong. So Josiah Trotter's in the portal from West Virginia, which is like a similar conversation. You fire a head coach. What are you going to do? This is personal for you, Bill.
It's Axman Jr.
It is Axman Jr. Son of
I
Jeremiah
tweeted
Trotter.
tweeted at Temple football and new head coach Casey Keeler that they need to bring Jeremiah Trotter Jr. home, but I don't know that they're going to do that.
Oh, you actually tweeted at them? Now stop it. Now stop this. Stop it for real. If you keep doing stuff like that, they're going to hire you as the GM of Temple football. I'm serious.
Because they're going to build the whole thing out of Philly guys? Yeah.
Who was the guy there? Who's the guy that got hired? We were talking about. They got hired at Vanderbilt out of the media. Barton Simmons, right?
Barton Simmons, yeah.
He's the GM there. Adrian Wojnarowski is the GM of St. Bonaventure's basketball. I'm serious. Everybody in the chat, tell Landis not to leave, because you were on Casey Keeler. Casey Keeler's going to be like, there was a guy out there in the media who believed in me when nobody else did. He called me the next Kurt Signetti. I'm happy to announce him as the next general manager of Temple football. Our own Philly Billy, William Landis. Don't do it. My God. I'm so mad now. I'm going to end the show. Stop knowing ball.
It'd be hard to turn down. I mean, I'm just going to be honest. It'd be hard to turn down.
Because you know the thing about this? You know who's not getting hired for that job? This guy. I ain't going nowhere. This is the peak for me. This is it. This is all I'm qualified for. Can you get some terrible football takes for the playoff that will torpedo your chances of getting hired by Casey Keeler and bringing in Josiah Trotter? I'm so mad about this now. Like, I'm not even joking. Okay.
Do you think, Josiah Trotter is from Philly. Fran Brown, Jersey man.
Oh yeah. They could work that out. Oh yeah. That feels real. Yeah. But then his brother played at Clemson, right? Jeremiah Trotter Jr. actually.
Jeremiah Trotter Jr.
Yeah.
The actual Axman Jr. played at Clemson. Yeah.
Okay. You want to talk about Jalen Daniels staying at Kansas, which again, like, is portal news because he didn't go in the portal, right?
Yeah. I kind of assumed he was going to. He has one more year left. I don't think he's got a ton of NFL prospects unless he makes some real strides as a passer, but he's a super dynamic college quarterback that I think would have been highly coveted had he entered the transfer portal, and Kansas did what it had to do to keep him. And the way Pete Thamel reported it is that he reached a new deal to stay at Kansas, which is just like, that's the world we're in now with Kansas football. So huge deal, I think, for the Jayhawks to keep him. They lost DJ Warner, a really talented freshman defensive end. Is going in.
I didn't even realize that.
They're not.
That guy's good.
Kansas is another program that I think, like, when it gets good players, going to really have to fight teams off to keep them. But they are keeping Jalen Daniels. And one other guy who announced he was staying that I thought was a big deal was Emmett Johnson at Nebraska, the running back, who I thought like really was kind of coming on at the end of the year and was going to go into the portal and got talked back into staying. Pretty dynamic guy, rusher and pass catcher that I think could be a pretty big piece of their offense next year.
So there's just going to be stuff constantly happening. We'll check in as frequently as is needed on all the most important Northern portal news, and we'll keep you advised. And something we will also do for sure and it might not be until the offseason, it might be still during the playoffs here, is we will go back and look at the most important portal moves from last offseason and who in the North really was helped by the portal. Were they under the radar signings? Were they major signings that we knew would make a difference? Because I think the best way to evaluate what's happening now in the portal, Landis, is to look back on what really mattered out of the portal, because there are going to be moments when we're going to overrate portal things and when we're going to underrate portal things. And so I think we're all still new to this and we don't have a complete handle on it yet. And your mind there's just going to be a wave of stuff. And a lot of the stuff is backups who never played. And that doesn't mean they can't go help a team, but we'll try to make sure and bring you the most important portal news whenever it happens here on Kings of the North. All right.
Yeah.
As John points out, Dominic Zavada, the kicker from Michigan, right? We want to
do an all North portal team.
I think that's the plan. It won't be hard at all.
No.
Like we'll have fights for real. Like I'm like, who's the all North portal quarterback? It's like, I guess it's Dylan Gabriel because he's going to go to the Heisman ceremony, but like Curtis Rourke makes a case, right? And like and so does Kyle McCord, right? So I mean, like it is like there's like
King Kyle McCord.
Kyle McCord. You saw that guy. Saw that guy. Right? They did a graphic for Kyle McCord for leading the nation in passing yards where he was sitting on a throne. So like, what are you going to do? And then people were like, but he threw 12 picks. Like they don't have a throne for that. Someone was like, he finished 36th in passer rating. It's like, they don't have a throne for that. They have a throne for this, leading the nation in passing yards. It doesn't mean no one who sits on the throne is perfect.
Right.
But you're on the throne, man. I don't know what to tell you. All right. When we come back, we're going to run through some bowl games next on KOTN. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis, producer Mike. You want to give us a thumbs up, we'll take it. You want to subscribe, that'd be awesome. You want to hit the bell so you get all the notifications. You want to give us a review on Apple Podcasts or anything like that. Drop us a rating on wherever you listen to podcasts. We're not going to ask you. We're not going to tell you what to rate. If you think we're a 1, that means we need to get better. And so tell us how you think we can get better. There are people who just rip us, and we understand that too, but there are also people who say very nice things about us. We certainly appreciate that, but we're never going to beg for 5 stars. We want real ratings so that we can give you the best of Northern football. And that includes running through these bowl games, Bill. 12. Do I have that right? Is it 12? 12 bowl games.
Yeah, 12 bowl games. Yeah.
Involving our 28 Northern teams. Of course, there's like some other MAC teams and other Mountain West teams that are of the North, but just aren't in our group of 28. Of our group of 28, there are 5 North versus North bowl games, 3 North versus border team bowl games, and only 4 North versus South. I wish there were a few more North versus South, Bill, but what are you going to do?
Yeah, but I do like the North versus North too. You know, I'll take either one.
So we're just going to run through these quick, just so like everybody gets the lay of the land, and then we'll have a bowl thing. We're going to have a bowl thing. I got folks in here, like we got good folks who want to work with us, so we can do a cool bowl thing. North versus North bowls. First one is Pitt versus Toledo in the Game Above Sports Bowl on December 26th. This is in Detroit at Ford Field, whatever it used to be called. Pitt is favored by 9.5, and it's just one of these things, Landis, like this is fun. Like Pat Narduzzi versus Jason Candle. Again, I don't know. You hear Jason Candle's name floated for various things, but like this is a fun game for us. For 7-0 Pitt, that became 7-5 Pitt. This is not what they would have had in mind.
This is not what they had in mind. I do wonder, though, if Pat Narduzzi, is there anything in Pat Narduzzi's past that would cause him to wear a shirt and tie and want to beat Toledo by 1 billion points like he did with Youngstown State?
Oh, yeah. Watch out.
Yeah.
But again, what the heck? It's Pittsburgh versus, like, you can't get more north than this.
Pitt versus Toledo in Detroit. It's the Rust Belt Bowl.
We have some games to get to, but like, I was like, should we go to this and then go cover our bowls? Okay. Maybe.
Maybe. I think that's a Thursday. That's a Thursday, I think, 26th.
Now, like we're saying to this, I'm like, 4-hour live pregame show from Detroit for Pitt versus Toledo. Like
Maybe.
we've been all over Pitt. Like we can't get away from Pitt. So, like we
I don't leave for the Rose Bowl till the 28th. So
okay,
I might be available.
I'm going to the Sugar Bowl on the 29th, so I think I'm available too. So again, we're gonna be all through all the playoff stuff. But like if we get to this, and this is one of the guy we didn't mention in the portal, Nate Yarnell, the backup quarterback for Pitt, who was beaten out by Eli Holstein, but was needed this year and played quite well in some really big spots, and was the guy a year ago who finished the season as the starting quarterback and then didn't win the job this year. And I thought like handled himself from afar very well as like a guy who stayed ready, and then like in the Clemson game was played well when needed. He's another guy that won in the portal. So Pitt versus Toledo in this game, Pitt favored by 9.5. Rutgers, Kansas State in the Rate Bowl, also on December 26th. Kansas State is favored by 7 in this. Like this is like a northern banger, Landis. Like I'm not sure we can get more north than Rutgers versus Kansas State. Who else would be excited by this except us? It's like, what? They're on the same podcast? Kansas State and Rutgers? Like, yeah, they are. This is us, man.
I'm excited for this game because it'll be like the launch point into 2025 for Avery Johnson and Ethan Kaliak-Manis, right? So
yeah,
I want to watch those guys duel it out. This is in Phoenix, I believe.
Okay. Excited. December 27th, I'm also excited for this. Syracuse versus Washington State in the Holiday Bowl on December 27th. Syracuse is favored by 5.5. It just does not seem like the kind of thing that Kyle McCord will participate in, and you understand why.
Yeah, this would be if we were getting Kyle McCord slinging it around versus John Mateer running like a crazy person. This would be appointment television, but I don't think we're going to get either of those guys in this game.
It's certainly like Mateer. Is it just rumors of maybe Mateer in the portal? Or
I don't think he's officially in the portal yet, but the people are. Where did the OC went to Oklahoma, right? I think there's some perhaps John Mateer to Oklahoma.
Yeah,
stuff out there. Yeah.
Wow, that's wild. Cam Ward was the Washington State quarterback last year. Went to Miami, and it's like I got John Mateer. They were ready to go. They were fine.
They were fine. They were good this year.
John Mateer, Baker Mateer. God, I'd love to keep Baker Mateer in the North. Anyway, this is a North versus North game. We understand this. Trevor Payne is already in the portal for Syracuse. Like we get it. There's there's just some veteran senior guys. I mean, and my expectation anymore, Landis, is if you are going to prepare for the NFL draft and your team is not in the playoff, I just don't blame anybody.
I don't.
Right?
Yeah, I don't.
And I expect it that you aren't going to play.
I don't fault you for it. And if these bowls like aren't going to pay these guys to play in these exhibitions, then I certainly understand it.
Yeah. Another North is North. This is a good one. The Pinstripe Bowl. That's in the Pinstripe. Who's that? Is it the Yankees? The Yankees lose Juan Soto, right? Yeah. He played for the Yankees, but they get Boston College in Nebraska. So it's a fair trade.
It is a fair trade.
Even.
Yeah.
It's even.
Who would you rather have, really? Would you rather have Juan Soto or would you rather have Bill O'Brien?
Yeah. Dylan Raiola. Like Matt Rule versus Bill O'Brien. Again, like I just might skip the Sugar Bowl and go to this. I just want to like just grit this out. Bill O'Brien and Matt Rule. Can you get more North than those two guys? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it's pretty good. I like the matchup.
So Grayson James, I don't know. I assume he'll play for Boston College, right? And Dylan Raiola, he'll play for Nebraska. So again, this is one of those where it's like you kind of want a young quarterback because like that who's not transferring. It's like, oh, then they'll play in the bowl game, right? So you don't opt out if you're not going anywhere.
Boston College may come up in our Thursday conversation.
Oh, look at you with the conversation. See, I knew you were thinking about it. Seriously. You know who thinks 3 steps ahead like that? College football general managers. Can you imagine if it's just me? What are we doing here? My life is in your hands. I hope you're happy.
I can do what's the guy who's the Green Bay basketball coach who has terrible sports takes? Doug Gottlieb. Yeah. He's a college basketball head coach and still does his radio show every day. Oh yeah. Ask KC if you can do that. Yeah. Oh, now I feel much better about it. Look at you with the plan. You are thinking about this a little too much. You've already discussed. You already are 2 jobs, Landis. Oh my God. My life is in your hands. I just want you to know that. BYU versus Colorado, the Alamo Bowl on December 28th. Deion Sanders says like his guys are playing. And he's the dad of one of them. So it's like in a normal situation, you'd be like, is Shedeur Sanders playing? You'd be like, no way. That guy's going to be the 4th pick in the draft. But if your dad makes you play, then I guess you play.
And same with Travis Hunter. Deion Sanders on the bowl call was like, we're going to go pick up the Heisman and then come down and play this game. So just credit to Deion Sanders for keeping it old school. BYU versus Colorado. This is the Alamo Bowl in San Antonio. Again, just so people know this, the arrangement here is Big 12 versus former Pac-12. So this is two teams who are in the same conference this year, but did not play in the regular season. And so you are getting two teams who tied for first in their conference playing each other in a bowl game. But I don't think there's anything weird about it, Landis. I think it's only cool. I'll watch this.
I'll definitely watch it because I think if those guys for Colorado play, this is like if Colorado and BYU played in October, right? This is like we'll get the full-fledged experience out of both teams.
Or it's like if these two teams, if the tiebreakers had gone differently and the championship game of the Big 12, instead of being Iowa State, Arizona State, had been BYU, Colorado. And there's no reason it couldn't have been that. We don't understand the tiebreakers. We were just like, oh, this is what the tiebreakers say. They all finished with the same conference record. Yeah. BYU and Colorado had as much right to be in the Big 12 championship game as Iowa State and Arizona State did. So like we're getting the alternate universe of this. Like, let's go. Those are
when do you leave? When do you leave for Sugar Bowl?
29th.
You're going to leave a day early, go to San Antonio.
Going through San Antonio. We'll tell our bosses. We're just going to. I booked a 9-leg flight from Detroit to New York to San Antonio to New Orleans because I could not live with myself if I didn't get to watch BYU, Colorado, Boston College, Nebraska, and Pitt, Toledo, because that's how we roll. 5 North versus North games. North versus border games. Again, this makes sense only to our audience and to Kings of the North. Iowa versus Missouri. This is actually a Big Ten SEC game, which is like cool. It's like, hey, that's pretty cool. This is in the Music City Bowl on December 30th. Missouri's favored by 2.5 in this game. So what do you think of this?
There are two more like opposite ends of the spectrum coaches in college football than Kirk Ferentz and Eli Drinkwitz, like in terms of their personalities and putting themselves out there. So that'll be fun. I don't know what Iowa's going to do on offense because Caleb Johnson's opted out, right? He's turning pro. He's not going to be there, and I have no idea who of Missouri. Like I would imagine Luther Burden's not going to play in this game.
I think Luther Burden already announced.
So you're not going to get maximum capacity of either of these teams, but I'll watch Iowa's defense go up against Missouri's offense. That'd be fun.
Jay Higgins is playing in the bowl game, so
of course he is.
True Northern King. By the way, producer Mike says that Bill Belichick was just on with Pat McAfee, said he's had a couple good conversations with North Carolina about their head coaching job, and we'll see how it goes. He also said that coaching college football is more like the NFL now than it used to be. So that's one of those, like, if he was having these conversations with West Virginia instead of North Carolina, would we be like, yes, Bill Belichick? Or would we be like, what?
No. This is going to be a disaster. I hope they hire him. I can't wait.
Yeah. Well, and there was a report that part of what he wanted was that Steve Belichick, the current defensive coordinator at Washington, be named the coach in waiting, which is a Bobby Knight, Pat Knight situation, and that didn't go too hot. So
no. So if it were in the North, no, thank you. If it's in the South, please let it happen.
I'm just trying to think. So that Bobby Knight, Pat Knight thing just leapt to mind. If there was a thing in college football with like a college football head coach and his son, and like trying to put the fight, prioritizing the family ahead of the program, that kind of thing. Anyway, I can't think of one right now. So that was Iowa versus Missouri in the Music City Bowl. Iowa's a 2.5-point underdog. Washington versus Louisville in the Sun Bowl on December 31st. Washington is a 5-point underdog. This will be like the DeMond Williams experience, right? I want to watch DeMond Williams, who played against Oregon as a starting quarterback. He's going to be the quarterback next year at Washington. Like, let's see what that looks like. We want more.
Yeah, this is I know it didn't go great, but like Jackson Arnold playing for Oklahoma last year and Nico Imaliava playing for Tennessee last year. Like this is an it's not even an opt-out, but like this is a changing quarterback situation that I can get behind when it comes to bowl season. Like give your young future starter the platform to jumpstart things.
Last North versus border is Minnesota, Virginia Tech, because Virginia Tech, Louisville, and Missouri are all border teams to us. That's why this is North versus border. Minnesota, Virginia Tech in the Duke's Mayo Bowl, January 3rd, late. Minnesota's a 4.5-point favorite. I don't know what Max Brosmer's going to do, but like Coy Parrish and Darius Taylor have already announced that they're not going anywhere because Minnesota has its NIL in shape. And so they made announcements that were like, hey, we're staying and like contribute to our NIL program to help build Minnesota football. Like, just not to repeat myself for the 400th time, just feel really good about where Minnesota is. And like, I want PJ Fleck to have mayo on his head.
I wonder, do we know, does Ariante Ursary, has he said whether or not he's going to play? He was the Big Ten Offensive Lineman of the Year and he's going to be like a top 15 pick.
That feels like a no, but like would be a heck of a yes.
Yeah.
So, all right. So then we have 4 North versus South Bowls, starting with West Virginia, Memphis, and the Frisco Bowl in Frisco, Texas. This is the early one that you mentioned. December 17th. I don't even like, this is what's West Virginia going to look like. I don't know, but maybe West Virginia fans can have a nice little party. Yeah,
maybe. I wonder what they'll do with quarterback. Do you let Garrett Green like play I guess it's be the final game of his career, right? Or do you turn it over to
Nico Marchiol?
Nico Marchiol, thank you. Forgot the last name. But
I don't know. Chad Scott, the OC, is going to be the interim coach for the bowl game. So this is just a tough spot, but it's like for those players who want to go play in a bowl game and go have a good trip. West Virginia, again, 2-point underdog, December 17th. Iowa State, Miami is one I'm super excited for, but like Cam Ward's definitely not going to play for Miami. This is a cool matchup, and it's in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. But this is also one of those where it's like, I can get it. Like the fact that we've sort of wiped out that the entire top layer of the best bowl games are part of the playoff now. When you're a team like Miami, and if you had beaten Syracuse, you'd be in the playoff. And instead you're in the Pop-Tarts Bowl and you're a prop for a frosted breakfast treat. Like in this game, this is about the Pop-Tarts and the players are the props. Like this is, what's the number one thing people watch the Pop-Tarts Bowl for now? It's to toast a human, right? Whatever they do to that guy. So like, I'm excited because I think like, because Rocco Becht will play in this game because he's going to be back as Iowa State's quarterback. You're not going to get Cam Ward, but this is a high-level game. But if you're Miami, you're like, I can't believe we're going to the Pop-Tarts Bowl.
Yeah,
when I Miami thought we were going to be in the playoff.
Miami went to the Pinstripe Bowl last year and lost to Rutgers. So they're going to go to the Pop-Tart Bowl and lose to Iowa State. But are we going to get what's the situation here with Iowa State's receivers? Do you know?
I don't know. I think Jalen Noel, I think, expressed interest in playing. So like, but two great NFL bound receivers. You know, anything would be a bonus. Yeah. December 28th, Iowa State favored by 1 right now. Do you think this is cool or weird? Michigan playing Alabama again. This is the ReliaQuest Bowl on December 31st. Alabama's favored by 11.5. And like, it's like, oh, cool. This is 2 blue bloods who played in a playoff semifinal last year. Why are we doing this again? I can't tell which way it goes.
It doesn't do a whole lot for me. Like if you tell me like or like Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant going to play, is Jalen Milroe going to play? So like then maybe I'll get a little bit more excited about that.
I just thought there was opportunities for like different matchups I just like the best part about bowl season is like teams who never play each other playing each other. So to play for a second consecutive postseason in a game that literally matters 1% as much as when you played last year is a little weird to me.
I wouldn't have hated because we have the Citrus Bowl next, which is South Carolina versus Illinois. I would not have hated flipping Michigan and Illinois. So you get Illinois against Alabama, and then you get the Davy and Clowney game rematch, Michigan, South Carolina.
Yeah. Our guy, John, the Michigan fan, who's such a loyal listener and viewer here, says he would have rather had a new team. You teased it. South Carolina, Illinois in the Citrus Bowl, also December 31st. South Carolina is favored by 11.5 here. Like this is, I think in the end, like Illinois was never in anybody's playoff discussion, but these are both 3-loss teams who their losses are to good teams. If we get reasonable facsimiles of these teams, this is a good game, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Because I think like a lot of South Carolina's like players are pretty young too, so I think you're going to get more, not the full South Carolina experience, unless guys transfer. But I don't think that'll happen for South Carolina.
But you'll get Lenora Stellers, right?
Yeah, and you should get like Dylan Stewart. Dylan Stewart's a freshman, so I guess you could see like really good young players start to opt out of bowls too. I don't know that I blame them for that either, but I don't know that we're there quite yet. No, this should be. I think this could be a fun game.
This is South Carolina's 15 and Illinois' 20 in the last playoff ranking. So that's like That's two good teams. Okay. That'll do it. We have a bunch of stuff planned this week. We have guests coming on. We will continue to, of course, talk about the playoff, but not only the playoff, because, again, we are part of a sport that has its draft, its free agency, and its playoffs all happening at the same time. So the sport is changing around us, and we know that really matters to the 23 Northern teams that aren't in the playoff. So we're not going to ignore that stuff, but we're also going to get you prepped better than anybody else for what Indiana, Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, Notre Dame, and to some extent Boise. We won't be as good on Boise as we are on our 5 main teams, but we'll get you all ready for what you need for that playoff experience as well. Thanks as always. I thought did you think the graphics look sweet as all get out today, Landis?
Yeah, because Mike knows what he's doing.
He's
playoff push.
Yeah, and Mike is not feeling great, and he's pushing through. But when the most dangerous men graphics had their heads on logos, oh my God. I didn't know I was seeing Howard Cross's face today, but when I did, made me feel good. All right. So always thanks to producer Mike for that. Thanks to you guys for being part of it. We'll see you on Tuesday. For now, he's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings. Oh, I have to go vote for the Heisman. Did you vote for the Heisman yet?
I did. I voted this morning.
Okay. I have to vote before 5 p.m. I put a reminder in my phone because I tweeted something out this week about, like, if people need more than 24, 36 hours to vote, if they don't vote, take their vote away. And I was like, they're going to take my vote away if I forget to vote. I'm not going to forget. But I just want people to know that I prioritize preparing for this show. And now I am not going to leave this desk until I have a very sophisticated, nuanced 3-person Heisman ballot ready. Also, maybe I'll just call you and say who you voted for, and you can tell me who to vote for.
Sure.
Right. I mean, it's like
I voted for Josiah Trotter.
If I can pick the brain of a future college football GM, why wouldn't I do that? All right. Anyway, he's Bill. I'm Doug, and that was Kings of the North.